Hello everyone, my name is Uthris, and welcome back to another episode of Kerbal Space Program. Today we are building the largest single launched item that we have made so far in terms of volume and mass. Probably not part count. I think part count wise, the satellites have been the most because there's just so many little details in those items. This is going to be the science module for the space station up in low Kerbin orbit at the very moment. It's going to have 2 science bays because I just think that looks cooler than only having one. Why have one when you can have 2? It's going to attach on the front side at this hitchhiker's can. And then also on the front side, we're going to have a nice slanted nose to another docking port. That docking port could be used for future shuttles or future other docking missions over here to this space station once it's kind of a little bit more developed and we're actually sending crew to man it, and we're sending maybe some fuel canisters so we can use it as a refueling point. You know, this station's going to be multi-role, multifunctional for sure. And we're going to even use the Lander MK2 landing can there in the middle just to provide a little bit of a break in texture also. So these science modules, I don't know how useful they are, to be honest. I know as you get farther away from Kerbin, you kind of get exponentially more science for that. However, we're going to try this thing out. And even at the end, we'll put a science junior just to kind of show that this is a little bit more of the science sector of the station. Small docking points. I don't know what they're going to be used for just yet on the side. We could eventually have some tugs or some other miscellaneous items that need docking. And I think having a few spare docking ports in the future is just going to be a good addition to keep this thing flexible and reliable for future state of our space agency. We have goo canisters. These are just kind of detail pieces. We're adding RCS thrusters. This is kind of our first vessel to actually use RCS thrusters. And hopefully it works out well. I'm not a huge fan of the way the RCS thrusters control. Honestly, I feel like while it is cool that I have to use different keys on my keyboard, I feel like if I tell it to go forward, the direction that I'm looking, the crew should be able to manage that kind of input and make it go in the direction that I'm requesting. So I honestly don't like RCS thrusters too much. I'm not very good at them. I suppose that's something I'm going to have to get better at if we want this thing to dock up correctly to the command module. So we're going to have lights going down and highlighting certain areas, like the ladder going down the whole length of the vessel. Because these are kind of service areas, I want them to be a little bit well lit. We're using directional, kind of more point lights on this. Also, I thought about using some of these strip lights, but I've never used them before, and it is a round object, so using a vertical straight line just might not look good. We're adding more radiators as detail pieces, just like what we did with the command module. Radiators while may not serve a purpose without some mods and the requirement to actually disperse heat on these stations, I'm going to add them because I just think they're really great detail pieces for the same reason that we add them in spaceship designs for like games like Avorion or whatever, right? Because these ventilations are just super important from like a space safety aspect. You got to be able to get as much of the heat out as possible. We're going to get a communications array. I saw that there was a node at the top here, which I thought was funny looking. So I figured if I attach it up the front and make it align into the window supports, we can have a communications kind of viewpoint as well in this area. We'll stand it up vertically, take a look around, make sure everything's looking good. Just realized that we didn't grab RCS fuel, so I'm going to be changing out the fuel type tanks that we were using there to first off, I need to get a hard point, so I'm gonna temporarily attach them back, but then I'm just gonna hide them on the inside. So these are our RCS tanks. I like this RCS tank. It's got a lot of the interior details that make it feel a little bit more like space utility. I'm just trying to figure out how I want to frame these to make it look good. I honestly liked the circular kind of hallway, so we're going to make it a little bit more simple with just a structural tube and then a docking port. The reason for that is if I would have had like the metal struts on the command module, I think it would have made sense to have it here as well, but because the command module doesn't have that with its docking point currently, I'm not going to do that here to this little stage. We could fly an engineer up there and change the docking configuration on the fly, but for now, that might just be a future project here later. So since this thing's so tall, it's going to need a very large fairing. It's also going to need a large control surface. So we're adding the new inline control surface here that provides much more torque than the very first default one. We'll give it some struts so that it's structurally sound and doesn't wobble too much. Anything in Kerbal Space Program, once you get to a certain size and length, it's going to start wiggling. You know, that's just normal Kerbal Space Program mechanics, right? So beneath this, we'll attach the fairing. Also, we need to reduce some of the lighting here because we got rid of that other module. So we got to make sure that's configured, and maybe some dome lighting by some of these other docking ports so that they're a little bit more lit up and looks good. I don't know. I like adding a bunch of lights and miscellaneous things to these builds. So the fairing, once the fairings get this big also, they look a little weird and disproportionate, especially if you use a smaller rocket. Now this thing is just going into LKO, and that means it doesn't really need like a crazy rocket just to get it there. If this was going all the way to the moon, obviously it would need to be bigger from a rocket standpoint. But at the moment, it's not going there, so I don't have to worry about it too much. We're going to try and squeeze in a command probe because I totally forgot that we needed one for this device, because once we put this into position, the plan is to burn off the booster and get that to return back to Kerbin and burn up in the atmosphere, because you know, we don't really have the fuel tank storage module on here just yet, and that is like something I want to make at some point. So redo the fairing. You know, I do multiple iterations of these type of things, so it just takes me a little bit to get it right and the way that I want it. So initially, we're going to be using a Poodle engine for this upper stage, which is great, and I think that will work wonderfully for its purpose. However, that fuel tank is a little bit small, so we end up upgrading that eventually in this build. And now, you know, we're just going to go ahead with our mainsail engine at the lower stage, because the mainsail, you can't go wrong with the mainsail. And I just love painting the bottom part orange. It's the best fuel tank color in my opinion, because it's just it just makes you think of the space shuttle tank, and it's just really cool looking. So we're going to add some boosters, some liquid fuel boosters on the side. Unlike solid fuel boosters, liquid fuel boosters are generally more efficient for our purpose, and we'll even give it a long, bigger inline nose cone there. I thought about doing some special items for the engines, maybe adding multiple engines at the bottom instead of just kind of two fixed engines here. So maybe even changing out the mainsail for the inline kind of dual nozzle engine as well. So, you know, I just kind of play around with this kind of stuff. Obviously, the more engines you add, I think I'm looking for the engine plate right now. The more engines you add, the heavier it's going to be. But I do like, it looks like they updated the standard kind of swivel engines. So that's something that I just kind of noticed there. So I'm just trying to make like an amalgamation kind of engine here just to see what it looks like. And I think that looks pretty cool with the exposed four engines. That's going to provide a lot of lift, but I'm still worried. Right now our total delta V is like 3,200 or so, 3,600. For some reason, I'm just like, well, why don't we just go big or go home? We're using some asparagus staging here to get some fuel back into the main body. Why don't we just go ahead, one, increase this for the Poodle engine to make that a little bit more usable. And then two, I don't need to carry that big of a main stage if we end up with 4 total boosters. Because why have 2 boosters when you could have 4 boosters? Why not, you know? Because this thing's heavy, I just want a lot of lift to it. Though honestly, I feel like this ends up being a little bit overkill for the size. But, you know, $124,000, it's worth it. No regrets at all. This mission ends up being rather quick and successful here lately. We've been doing a pretty good job of achieving our goals. So, hey, there we go. We'll move it out to the launch pad. It's going to be a quick flight because we don't have to go very, very far. The station kind of hovers around 200-some thousand, or about 150,000 kilometers above Kerbal. So we'll just go ahead and fly towards it. Now, I left a little bit late here to try to catch up to the space station. So that's my bad, as always. We'll start at half thrust just to save some fuel and some engine power for when we get higher up into the atmosphere here. And as we approach that nice kind of 15,000 meters, 20,000 meters, we'll roll over even more and get rid of those tumbling boosters. And now we are at a good arc up and over. So again, I think I just go too high when I do these missions. I'm too vertical for too long. Still something I'm trying to work on to make these a little bit more efficient flights. But at the moment we're approaching, and we're going to get an intersect with this, but we're going to be behind the space station. So that's a concern. So I'm going to go ahead and raise my orbit up above. Now I could keep it low and catch up to the space station, but for some reason I figured, well, we're already pointing this direction, so I'll just raise it to like 250,000. Make sure our antennas are set up and configured, and take a look at it. It's pretty good looking little science module in my opinion. We'll warp over here, round out our orbit, and then it's just kind of a waiting game because now the space station down below is going faster than us, so it will eventually come back around and catch up to us. So this thing's gonna have to sit into orbit, you know, just for a few days. It's not too bad. And we'll just kind of get a maneuver node checked. Okay, that didn't really work, so we'll go into another couple rounds from Kerbin, see how that looks. Okay, it's still not there, so we'll just go around another like 2 more. See how that looks, and there we go. We get a decent intersect now. We're gonna fiddle with it though, as I like to do. So having the 2 points means basically between the orange point and the purple point, we're going to be pretty close together. So that means it's a very rounded orbit and intersect line, which I like, honestly. It makes my job a little bit easier. Now, this thing, since it does have RCS thrusters, it's going to be a little bit more maneuverable than our Minmus heavy lifter that we used in the last mission. When it comes to rotating and flipping this thing around to make it match speeds. We can obviously use the greater torque here, which is great. But not only that, but the RCS thrusters are going to provide that additional maneuverability that we'll need. All right, so now we're flying close towards the object. We have another intersect, which is good. We'll flow down and get a little bit closer. We'll match speeds again. And then at this stage, we'll flip over and do a quick little flip here towards the command module. Now, Valentina Kerman has been up here for a long time. She has been chilling in the command module, enjoying the views of Kerbin, trying to orchestrate kind of what we need in this docking maneuver here. Maybe at this stage, she's just making sure everything looks good, and she'll probably validate that the whole interior has functionality, all that good stuff, as the commander of the space station. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and get even here. We'll set our targets and control points to the docking areas. We need to translate down, and then we'll have to stop our momentum a little bit. If I find the key to press to do that, I get so confused about what keys do what when it comes to RCS thrusters, especially when you go into docking mode. So we're below it now. We're gonna try and go for the top docking module, which should be pretty straightforward. We'll get a little bit more lined up, and then we'll line up the docking module, and then it's just kind of like a simple translation vertically to get this thing to kind of meet here. So this is a big module. Oop, I tapped it, my bad, but don't worry, SAS is turned on, so it didn't go tumbling. There we go. We can control from there and kind of wiggle it around, take a look at it. It looks pretty good. We'll shut the kind of bay door there because that's not really super necessary. You can do a rotation via the docking clamps now, which is kind of nice in case you're a little out of alignment. You can kind of twist them about 30 total degrees either way. I'm okay with that. I wish it would have been a full 180 or something either direction. That way it doesn't really matter which way I dock up to it. We can just kind of rotate it into place, but oh well. So this is currently how this thing is going to look. We'll ditch the engine and make sure that is going back to Kerbin. The interior looks really good, you know, with the windows and stuff kind of exposed. And that is our current update to our space station project here for the Skippy Space Agency. If you enjoyed this flight, feel free to subscribe for more creative goodness such as this. If you enjoyed Kerbal Space Program, feel free to leave a like and let me know how you think that's going to turn out. If you have any tips and suggestions or other missions that we might need to go on in the future, leave a comment, and we'll see you all in the next episode as Valentina takes the inventory and makes sure this thing is in a nice, stable orbit and looks beautiful going forward.